9. Kaleb arrives home late. This scene vividly portrays the turbulent and painful family dynamics centered on Bernie, Kat, and Kaleb, which highlight the deep emotional rifts and struggles each character faces within the household. Character interaction and emotional underpinnings Bernie's concern and frustration. Bernie's entrance into Kat's room and her questions about Kaleb underline her role as a worried, overburdened mother trying to maintain control in a fractured family. Her admonishment about knocking reveals a yearning for respect and order amid the chaos. Kat's defiance and resentment. Kat's sharp responses and eye-rolling reveal her rebellious, defensive stance with her mother. Her dismissive attitude towards Kaleb's whereabouts and her blunt comments about their emotional disconnect underscore sibling rivalries and unresolved tensions, particularly around perceived parental favoritism. Bernie's emotional vulnerability. When Bernie opens up about the lost moment of connection with Kat, it humanizes her, showing a mother desperate for reconciliation and communication despite the resistance. Kaleb's isolation and struggle. Kaleb's late return and defensive answers to Bernie's probing reflect his deeper emotional struggles with anxiety, low self-esteem, and depression. His claim that he can't even approach a girl despite his feelings suggests profound social and emotional withdrawal. Family fragmentation. Kat's overhearing Bernie's confrontation with Kaleb and the ensuing conflict symbolize the wider familial breakdown, illustrating how individual struggles feed into collective dysfunction. Underlying care despite conflict. Despite sheer frustration, Bernie's insistence on knowing Kaleb's whereabouts and concern for his safety reveal a mother's protective instincts beneath the surface conflicts. Themes explored communication breakdown. The dialogue highlights how miscommunication and emotional barriers fracture family relationships. Adolescent alienation. Kat and Kaleb's detachment from each other and their mother reflects the loneliness and identity crises common in dysfunctional families. Parental pressure and mental health. Bernie's worries about Kaleb's mental state amidst ongoing neighborhood violence add layers of tension and urgency. Sibling rivalry and individual pain. The siblings' different coping mechanisms deepen the portrayal of family dysfunction. This key scene insightfully reveals the emotional and psychological complexities within the Edwards family, laying bare the internal conflicts and challenges that shape their interactions and individual trajectories in the King's Omen. 10. Kat Challenges Kaleb. This scene poignantly explores the complex and volatile relationship between Kat and Kaleb, wrapped in the broader context of family dysfunction and personal trauma within the King's Omen. Psychological and emotional analysis. Kat's aggression and control, Kat's forceful interrogation, physical intimidation, and accusations reveal her deep-seated fears and frustrations. Her anger acts as a defense mechanism, masking pain and a desperate attempt to assert control over Kaleb and the chaotic family environment. Her harsh words about Jasmine and the dangers he faces illustrate her cynicism and protective instincts, albeit expressed destructively. Kaleb's vulnerability and isolation. Kaleb's repeated attempts to evade confrontation, his cowering, and eventual breakdown expressed show profound emotional fragility. His nightmares and plea for understanding highlight his mental health struggles and need for compassion in a harsh world. His response underscores the theme of alienation within family structures impacting youths. Family communication breakdown. The volatile interaction underscores a family fractured by mistrust, unspoken pain, and lack of healthy communication, where care is entwined with conflict. Contrasting scene, Florence and Remy. In juxtaposition, the quieter but tense conversation between Florence and Remy reveals a sibling dynamic grounded in ambition, pragmatism, and differing degrees of risk tolerance. Florence's desire to escalate the family's involvement in the drug trade contrasts with Remy's caution and contentment, illustrating power ambition versus pragmatic survival. Florence's push for expansion and dominance versus Remy's preference for stability without unnecessary conflict. Sibling rivalry and cooperation. Despite differences, the sisters share history and mutual respect, showing layered family loyalty alongside rivalry. The burden of legacy. Their dialogue reflects the weight of carrying on a dangerous family empire and the personal risks involved. Themes explored: emotional turmoil, mental health, anxiety, and depression through Kaleb's struggles and family pressure. Power and legacy, the drive to reclaim dominance and maintain control within the violent inheritance of the Broussard family. Family dysfunction, conflict, miscommunication, and survival mechanisms shaping interpersonal dynamics. Survival versus morality, balancing ambition with caution and the ethical ambiguities of life and crime. This scene richly develops character psychology, family complexity, and thematic depth, weaving individual struggles into the broader tapestry of crime, loyalty, and human resilience in The King's Omen. 11. Bruce asks Nick for a promotion. This scene vividly illustrates the impact of workplace bullying on Bruce, using the interaction with his coworker Nick to highlight both the overt hostility and the underlying emotional toll. Nick's mocking, dismissive attitude toward Bruce's request for full-time work and his cruel jibes about Bruce's abilities create a hostile environment that undermines Bruce's self-esteem and sense of security. Bruce's reaction, silent anger evolving into quiet determination, reflects the psychological complexity victims often experience, a mixture of hurt, humiliation, and the resolve to endure or fight back. Nick's insensitive comments about Bruce's daughter, falsely attributing Down syndrome to her and mocking her abilities, represent a deep personal attack that intensifies the emotional pain and highlights the cruelty of workplace bullying. Psychological effects of workplace bullying illustrated: emotional distress, Bruce's initial disbelief, silent rage, and eventual smirk as he leaves signify the internal emotional struggle victims often face, balancing humiliation with resilience. Impact on self-esteem, repeated belittlement and mockery can severely damage an individual's confidence and professional identity. Hostile work environment. Nick's behavior creates an environment of fear and disrespect, contributing to stress and anxiety. Personal attacks, targeting Bruce's family, especially his daughter with special needs, amplifies the cruelty and potential for lasting psychological trauma. Coping mechanisms. Bruce's quiet resolve suggests a complex coping strategy, possibly planning to take action despite feeling overwhelmed. Broader implications. Research shows workplace bullying is linked to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, panic attacks, and other serious mental health consequences. Victims may suffer long-term effects that impact both their professional performance and personal lives, including increased risk for physical health issues such as cardiovascular disease. This scene captures the real human cost behind workplace bullying dynamics, emphasizing the intersection of professional struggle with personal pain in The King's Omen. Bruce's experience reflects how systemic cruelty can strain individuals living already difficult lives. 12. Reecie takes back the throne. This climactic scene from The King's Omen masterfully combines tension, power dynamics, and emotional complexity to portray the brutal realities of the criminal underworld and the weight of legacy on Florence, Reecie, Broussard, and her sister Remy. Deep dive analysis and descriptive overview. The scene opens in Darius's bar, a dangerous territory where Florence and Remy boldly confront the reigning drug lord with their son in tow. A symbolic act underscoring the ruthless environment that shapes their lives. Florence's deadpan humor about babysitting amidst such peril sharpens her hardened, fearless persona. The verbal sparring between Florence, Remy, and Darius crackles with tension and menace. Darius mocks their diminished status and questions their audacity, while Florence's sharp retorts reassert their defiance and reclaim lost power. The atmosphere thickens as Darius's men reveal their betrayal by switching allegiances, appending alliances, and underscoring themes of loyalty and treachery. Darius's desperate plea to spare his son humanizes him momentarily, revealing his vulnerability beneath the ruthless exterior. Florence and Remy's contrasting reactions to the child, her weaponizing of a 3-year-old Geronimo as an instrument of vengeance, and Remy's horror, highlight the complex morality and trauma of those entrenched in this violent world. The moment of Geronimo pulling the trigger, killing Darius, is brutal, surreal, and symbolic. Childhood innocence corrupted and weaponized by legacy and revenge. Florence's calm, emotionless detachment during the act and Remy's shock capture the psychological cost of survival and the cyclical nature of violence. Florence's flashback to burning a man alive as a child and her resolute action to kill Darius's son emphasize the enduring scars and harsh lessons from their upbringing, reinforcing themes of indoctrination and the inescapability of their violent fate. Thematic significance, legacy, and inherited violence. The scene powerfully illustrates how trauma, violence, and vengeance perpetuate through generations, shaping identities and destinies. Moral ambiguity. The interplay of ruthless pragmatism, Florence, and lingering humanity, Remy, complicates notions of good and evil. Loss of innocence. Geronimo's involvement symbolizes the tragic corruption of childhood shaped by a violent heritage. Power and retribution. The confrontation echoes broader themes of power struggles, betrayal, and the relentless quest for dominance. Psychological trauma. Florence's flashback and emotionless demeanor reflect deep psychological scars and hardened survival mechanisms. This gripping scene crystallizes the king's Omen's exploration of family, power, and the cyclical nature of violence, offering profound insight into Florence's character and the brutal legacy she and her family navigate. Florence's state of mind during the execution of Darius's son is marked by a cold, calculating acceptance of the brutal realities that define her world. Deeply shaped by her traumatic upbringing and the harsh lessons instilled by her father, Cameronali, she exhibits a detachment necessary for survival in the violent criminal underworld. Her actions, coaching Geronimo to pull the trigger and showing no visible emotion, reflect a psychological armor built to suppress empathy and human vulnerability. Florence views this act not as personal cruelty, but as a grim necessity dictated by the laws of survival. She sees the child as both a symbol and potential future threat, understanding that the violent legacies of their fathers will haunt them forever. This moment triggers an internal flashback to her own brutal initiation, reinforcing the cycle of violence that has shaped her identity. Florence's resolve and lack of emotion underscore a hardened resolve to do whatever it takes to protect and advance her family's empire, even if it means making devastating choices. In essence, Florence's mindset is one of pragmatic ruthlessness, driven by survival instinct, legacy preservation, and the recognition that empathy equates to weakness in their world. This scene conveys the profound psychological impact and intergenerational trauma stemming from forced childhood involvement in crime and violence, as reflected in the reporter's shocked and empathetic reaction. The imagery of kids dragged into a vicious planet emphasizes how young Florence and Remy were victims of circumstances beyond their control, resulting in irreversible emotional and psychological damage. Old Man Bruce's response adds nuance, distinguishing Remy's later, more tempered years from Florence's unbreakable resilience, forged in cruelty. The mention of Geronimo's reluctant entry into the drug game hints at the cyclical nature of crime within families, illustrating how the trauma and legacy of violence perpetuate. The story's darkest elements, including child indoctrination into violence and their resulting hardened psyche, align with real-world studies showing that trauma experienced early in life severely affects development, emotional regulation, and worldviews, often for a lifetime. The narrative underscores themes of lost innocence, the inescapability of legacy, and the moral ambiguity surrounding survival in brutal environments. The reporter's discomfort at the killing the kid thing humanizes the audience's horror, while Bruce's calm but candid reflections offer insight into the complex reality behind these lives. Overall, the scene is a vivid exploration of trauma's lasting effects on individuals and families involved in crime, emphasizing how childhood violence shapes identity, relationships, and fate across generations. 13. Angel Malik's violent introduction into the game. This scene is a pivotal emotional and psychological exploration of the consequences of parental conflict, violence, and family trauma on Angel Malik Broussard and his immediate family. Descriptive deep dive. The scene opens in the kitchen, a domestic space violently disrupted by Duke's aggression toward Charisse. His dismissive and accusatory tone introduces a toxic atmosphere of mistrust and fear. Charisse's direct confrontation and Duke's irresponsible excuses escalate the tension, setting a volatile emotional stage. Angel, standing between his parents, transitions from a silent observer to an active, violent participant. His outburst, "That's a damn lie," ruptures the fragile control Duke attempts to maintain. The sensory details amplify the emotional intensity. Duke's face, Charisse's pain, Angel's voice rising with rage, and the sudden eruption of violence with the stabbing. The imagery of Duke's blood sprinkling out, like a spigot, is visceral and raw, symbolizing the physical and emotional destruction occurring. Angel's repeated stabbing, his deranged look, and the blood covering him illustrate a psychological break, a moment where trauma and rage overpower childhood innocence. His mother's screams and shock contrast with Angel's detached and almost mechanical violence, underscoring his rapid loss of self and increasing alienation. Post-attack, Angel's chilling calmness, the subtle smile, and his reassurances to Charisse illustrate complex trauma responses, numbness, dissociation, and a twisted perception of justified violence. Charisse's heartbreak and resigned comment about the devil show her dawning realization of the irreversible rupture in her family. The decision to involve Florence and Remy links this domestic tragedy to the broader criminal network, demonstrating the inescapable grip of the crime legacy and its social consequences. Charisse's statement reveals the harsh reality. Crossing that line to gang involvement changes everything, marking a point of no return for Angel. Thematic and psychological significance cycle of violence. The scene reflects how domestic abuse and parental conflict can lead to early violent behavior and perpetuate intergenerational trauma. Trauma and dissociation. Angel's alternating rage and numbness reveal psychological defense mechanisms common in abused children exposed to severe trauma. Loss of innocence. The violent act symbolizes a brutal severing of childhood normalcy, accelerated maturity through violence. Family and social complexity. The involvement of criminal networks indicates how personal tragedy often intersects with systemic issues like organized crime. Moral ambiguity. Angel's justification of violence complicates notions of right and wrong within his context of survival and protection. This harrowing scene offers deep psychological insight into Angel's character and the destructive ripple effects of family violence, fitting within the King's Omen's broader exploration of crime, trauma, and survival. 14. The Broussard family discuss crime politics. This scene presents a rich, layered exploration of family power dynamics, legacy, and the burden of criminal heritage within the Edwards and Broussard families. Florence's perspective reveals her frustration and distrust toward the current power holders, whom she views as unqualified and opportunistic compared to Angela Edwards, a legendary figure she once admired for her dominance and control. Her sharp critiques of Cleotis and others highlight her belief in the importance of ruthless leadership and loyalty shaped by respect and shared legacy, a hallmark of her upbringing. Remy serves as a foil to Florence's bitterness and ambition, embodying a more cautious and pragmatic stance. Her calm, observant demeanor contrasted with Florence's fiery resolve enriches the tension between family members who share history but differ in outlook. Angel Malik's role as a peacemaker and strategist, framed by his educated, professional environment, introduces a modern, intellectual counterbalance to Florence and Remy's street-hardened personas. His insistence on realism and pragmatic patience emphasizes the challenges of maintaining power and safety amid unstable alliances and external threats. The scene's dialogue delves into core themes: the cost of ambition, the complexity of family loyalty, the psychological toll of violent upbringing, and the conflict between legacy and survival. Remy's emotional turmoil and Florence's hardened exterior reflect deeply personal responses to their shared traumatic past, embodied most starkly in the story of young Geronimo. Additionally, The discussion surrounding Angela Edwards, their role model, and the business's fractured state illustrates the shifting nature of criminal empires, where power is transient and often contested. Key themes: legacy and respect, the importance of shared history and respect within crime family leadership. Family division, divergent coping mechanisms and visions for the future among siblings. Power realism versus ambition, Angel's pragmatism versus Florence's fiery ambition. Psychological trauma, the enduring impact of childhood violence shaping adult behavior and attitudes. Criminal enterprise instability, the constant threats, betrayals, and recalibrations within the underworld. This scene is a masterful character study and thematic exploration illustrating how personal history, trauma, and ambition shape the evolving power structures within the King's Omen. 15. Preparing for the play. This scene vividly portrays the deep emotional and psychological impact of parental and family conflict on children and adults alike, capturing the undercurrents of frustration, anxiety, and unresolved trauma permeating the Edwards household. Caleb's depression and reluctance to attend Kat's play reflect the heavy burden he carries, shaped by his family's struggles and personal challenges. This is intensified by the surrounding atmosphere. Bernie's hopeful enthusiasm contrasts with Aurora's somber, tearful state, underlining the emotional complexity within the family. The interaction between Bruce and Roland highlights a tension rooted in caution, control, and distrust, signaling a household fraught with underlying stress. Bruce's protective instructions to keep the door open and the TV low suggest heightened anxiety about safety and secrecy, common in families dealing with external threats or internal instability. Bruce's anger and frustration about losing his job and the financial pressure of his daughter's medical bills bring to the surface themes of economic hardship, dignity, and the crushing weight of provider responsibilities. His anger toward Nick's cruelty and his fierce protectiveness regarding his daughter add emotional depth and nuance to his character. Aurora's comforting of Caleb offers a moment of tenderness and connection in an otherwise tense setting, indicating the importance of familial support amid adversity. Themes and insights: parental and family conflict. The scene illustrates how conflict and struggles within the family system create emotional distress, behavioral challenges, and fractured relationships among members. Economic hardship and stress. Bruce's job loss and the financial strain around medical care highlight how external pressures exacerbate internal tensions. Emotional isolation and support. Caleb's depression and Aurora's comforting hand emphasize the oscillation between isolation and connection. Anxiety and hypervigilance. Bruce's instructions and demeanor reflect a family coping with fear and uncertainty, impacting everyday interactions. This scene offers a powerful and nuanced glimpse into how systemic family conflict, economic hardship, and psychological distress intertwine, shaping the behaviors and emotional states of each character in The King's Omen. 16. Tragedy strikes. This scene provides a rich, multi-layered portrayal of family tension, personal trauma, and the fragility of relationships within the Edwards household, infused with vivid symbolic and emotional detail. Caleb's visible depression and overwhelming anxiety highlight his deep internal conflict regarding his sister Kat, whose performance he cannot bear to watch due to past traumas with Jasmine. His physical reactions, nausea, near panic attack, heavy breathing, reflect acute psychological distress manifesting physically. This tension embodies the struggle of living with unresolved emotional burdens and the trigger effect of familiar, yet painful, family interactions. Roland's fascination with fire is deeply symbolic, a manifestation of inner turmoil, destructive tendencies, or a subconscious call for attention amid familial chaos. His playful but reckless lighting of matches culminating in an oven fire that spreads rapidly captures how small actions can spiral out of control, mirroring the family's volatile emotional environment. His cries and inability to extinguish the flames evoke helplessness and the destructive potential of unaddressed trauma. Bernie and Aurora's contrasting emotional states showcase different coping mechanisms. Bernie's forced optimism and Aurora's raw grief over the loss of her precious photographs. Aurora's screaming and breakdowns symbolize the shattering of cherished memories and the overwhelming nature of grief, revealing the fragility beneath her composed exterior. Bruce's growing anger and frustration over his precarious financial situation and job rejection add another layer of stress, expressing the heavy responsibility he carries as a provider in a troubled household. His reaction to the phone call about the fire provokes an urgent, protective response. His fierce defense of his family amid chaos exemplifies the role of father as both protector and provider, struggling with dire external pressures. Thematic and psychological depth, trigger and trauma responses. Kaleb's reactions vividly illustrate how unresolved trauma and family dynamics can provoke intense anxiety and physical distress. Symbolism of fire. Roland's interactions with fire symbolize latent emotional instability and potential for destruction within the family unit. Coping with loss. Aurora's mourning contrasts with Bernie's resilience, portraying diverse ways family members process grief and trauma. Economic and emotional pressure. Bruce embodies the intersection of financial hardship and emotional stress, grappling with feelings of failure and desperation. Family chaos and crisis. The fire incident serves as a metaphor for the underlying instability threatening to engulf the family emotionally and physically. This scene encapsulates the intricate emotional landscape of the Edwards family, using detailed character interactions and symbolism to deepen understanding of their pain, resilience, and the pervasive impacts of trauma binding them. This scene delves deeply into the fraught dynamics of the Edwards family as they navigate a crisis during Cat's play, revealing the raw emotional fractures underlying their interactions. Bernie's tearful entrance to Cat backstage immediately sets a tone of urgency and desperation. Her news about the house fire and Roland's hospitalization abruptly confronts the family with a physical manifestation of their troubled lives. Kat's dismissive and self-centered response, insisting on finishing the play despite the crisis, exposes her emotional detachment and selfishness, causing a stark clash with Bernie's raw maternal concern. The slap Bernie delivers is both an expression of overwhelming stress and a desperate attempt to shake Kat into reality, witnessed by others and escalating family tension. Aurora's uncontrollable grief and violent outburst, kicking seats, screaming, symbolizes the profound trauma and loss she feels, especially the destruction of irreplaceable photographs, which metaphorically represent shattered memories and stability. Bruce's efforts to restrain and console her amid the public spectacle highlight the strain of managing personal anguish while maintaining family cohesion. Kaleb's anxious observations of this chaotic, vulnerable scene adds another dimension, the way trauma manifests differently within each family member, with Kaleb internalizing stress while others express it outwardly. The public nature of this breakdown, the audience's eyes on the family, intensifies the sense of isolation and humiliation, as their private pain is laid bare in a hostile, unsympathetic environment. Bruce's decision to check the house against the urgency to be at the hospital shows his conflicted role as protector, caught between practical responsibility and emotional turmoil. Themes and symbolism: crisis and fragmentation. The fire acts as a metaphor for the family's instability, the way past trauma and present pressures ignite destructive consequences. Family dysfunction. Clashing personalities and diverging coping mechanisms reveal deep-seated fractures and unresolved resentments. Loss and grief. Aurora's breakdown embodies the profound emotional losses the family endures beyond the physical destruction. Public exposure of private pain. The family's turmoil in front of others heightens feelings of vulnerability and shame. Parental authority and limits. Bernie and Bruce struggle to maintain control amid chaos, illustrating the limits of parental power in fractured families. This scene intricately weaves emotional realism, symbolism, and character conflict to illustrate the Edwards family's profound struggles and resilience, enriching the psychological and thematic depth of the King's Omen. 17. Bruce witnesses the damage. This scene adeptly portrays Bruce's confrontation with loss, chaos, and the stark realities following the house fire, providing a contemplative and emotionally charged moment anchoring the narrative. Bruce's arrival to the burning house introduces a tangible symbol of devastation, his home, the physical embodiment of family stability and security, consumed by flames and collapsing piece by piece. His initial pause, sitting in the car to watch, captures the overwhelming helplessness one faces when witnessing the destruction of their sanctuary. The firemen's blockade and questioning underscore Bruce's loss of control and authority, compounding his emotional turmoil. The detail of Bruce lighting his cigarette with the residual flames nearby evokes a complex juxtaposition of destruction and resilience. Smoking amid ruins symbolizes both a moment of bitter solace and defiance in the face of disaster. Bruce's search around the yard, finding the partially burnt drawing of Aurora's child with a crown, is a poignant moment. The image of the child next to a crown symbolizes lost innocence and legacy, the fragile remnants of family heritage amid ruin. The act of carefully blowing out the fire on the remaining piece and pocketing it suggests Bruce's determination to preserve hope and memory despite overwhelming adversity. His call to Lysandra about a potential job injects a note of pragmatic survivalism. Amid personal disaster, life and its challenges continue. Driving off with the house burning behind him visually encapsulates the theme of moving forward despite loss and uncertainty. Emotional and thematic analysis, loss and helplessness. Bruce's silent observation of the burning house evokes the emotional paralysis and grief following traumatic loss. Symbols of legacy. Aurora's burnt drawing embodies the vulnerability and endurance of family identity and memories. Resilience and defiance. Lighting a cigarette amid flames illustrates the human instinct to find moments of control and comfort amid chaos. Survival and pragmatism. The job inquiry reflects Bruce's focus on moving forward despite adversity, highlighting the ongoing struggles of life. Physical and emotional rupture. The scene conveys the rupture between past stability and uncertain futures, anchored by Bruce's solitary figure. This scene poignantly captures themes of destruction, resilience, and the fragile hold on legacy amid chaos, deepening the narrative complexity of the King's Omen and offering profound insight into Bruce's character.